Greetings friends, my name is Pavel Steinman and now we'll dive into the top news of this day. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky took part in the summit of the European political community in Moldova. This summit is an important and unprecedented event for Moldova, which brought together 50 European leaders, presidents and prime ministers, who thus showed their respect for Eastern Europe.
Today, here, only 20 kilometers from Ukraine, we brought the continent together to reaffirm our collective and strong determination to bring peace back to Europe. Today we have shown our strength and unity at a time when the stability of our continent is under threat. We have shown that we are united against the biggest military aggression since World War II and against breaches of international law. We told President Zelensky that we will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes. As President of Moldova, I know that if it was not for Ukraine's resistance and courage, my own country would be threatened.
Moldova is effectively in the zone of Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Territory of Transnistria is occupied by pro-Russian authorities. From this territory, some Russian missiles were launched. And one of the goals of war against Ukraine was to make a ground pass through this territory. For this, Russia wanted to capture Kherson, Mykolaiv and Odessa. As we could see, Ukrainian armed forces stopped Russians at the Mykolaiv. But what could have happened if the plans of the Russians had succeeded? We only have to guess. At the summit, finally it came to statements that Transnistria is a land under Russian occupation. This was the first time that the key states of the West began to publicly recognize this. And the summit was symbolically held at the border of the occupation zone. Volodymyr Zelensky finally officially indicated the position on the possibility of the participation of the armed forces of Ukraine in its deoccupation, and officially destroyed the Russian format of negotiations on the Transnistrian settlement. In a word, the summit of the European political community quite naturally turned into a kind of pan-European security summit. However, it was not only the alliance that guaranteed the security of the summit and the country in general. Both President Sandu and other officials acknowledged that Moldova owes Ukraine first of all for this. Because without the heroic resistance of the armed forces of Ukraine last year, the Republic of Moldova could have ceased to exist altogether. The summit discussed important issues for Ukraine: the NATO summit in Vilnius, preparation of the peace summit, development of the aviation and Patriot coalition. Ukraine is ready to help Moldova to solve the problem of Transnistria quickly and effectively, if there is a corresponding request from the official Chisinau. President Volodymyr Zelensky took the opportunity of personal participation to meet with colleagues and partners, in particular with President of the European Council Charles Michel and President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen. And altogether, interesting and important episode happened. During the meeting of the two presidents from the post-Soviet countries, Volodymyr Zelensky and Ilham Aliyev from Azerbaijan, the leaders of the countries communicated with each other in English, although both understand and speak Russian perfectly. But every day we want less and less to do with Russia. On his second Africa tour, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba visited Morocco, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Mozambique and Nigeria. Ukraine's diplomatic push for Africa is part of the larger New Horizons strategy aimed at expanding opportunities for Ukrainian state, business and citizens in Latin American, African and Asian countries. Africa matters for Ukraine, as a tour demonstrated. It was also a historic occasion because Ukrainian foreign minister visited almost all of the nations for the first time in history. The tour had three major goals: to rally support for President Zelensky's peace formula, to revitalize relations with African nations, and to build mutually respectful and beneficial relations, expanding opportunities of economic and political cooperation. Ukrainian-African relations are currently at their peak in decades of Ukrainian independence, with a true Ukrainian-African renaissance underway.
Африка – це економічні можливості. Africa is economic opportunities. We want more Ukrainian companies to export their products to Africa, earn money and accordingly return it to Ukraine and create new jobs. There are really great prospects here. There are not even prospects but opportunities. The main thing is to use these opportunities. We are working to increase the number of African students in Ukraine after the war, that our universities regain the glory of training specialists for the whole world, in particular for Africa, because just on human contacts people will return to the country and become advocates of Ukraine, and this will be our soft power.
Despite their geographical distance, Ukraine and Africa have strong historical ties. We have always shared and supported African nations' aspirations for independence, unity and progress. Ukraine has assisted in preserving peace in Africa. Over 300 Ukrainian Blue Helmets participated in 4 UN-backed missions in the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, the Abyei region and Mali. Ukraine is currently working hard to expand its diplomatic presence on the continent. President Zelensky directed the Foreign Ministry to open 10 new embassies in Africa. 8 African countries have already agreed, and 2 more are finalizing domestic procedures. During his visit, the foreign minister announced the opening of embassies in Rwanda and Mozambique, as well as plans for the first Ukraine-Africa summit. Following the minister's visit to the African Union headquarters in Ethiopia, the Ukrainian government will cooperate with the African Union Commission on a systematic basis, including the exchange of diplomatic experience and countering information threats. Ukraine urges African countries to join Ukraine's peace formula, as well as to prevent Russia from influencing political processes or directly infringe on their state's sovereignty. All of this work is based on long-term strategic insight. We are working to win the war, ensure Ukraine's leadership in the post-war world, and open new horizons for business and citizens. The leader of the Wagner PMC, Yevgeny Prigozhyn, decided to ride the wave of Russian indignation with drone strikes on Moscow and surroundings, in order to once again discredit the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, showing himself to be a defender of the common people. In his commentary on the mass attack of kamikaze drones, he put the full responsibility for this on the country's military leadership while refraining from any attacks on Ukraine, apparently trying to focus the righteous anger of the Russians on the target he needed. The fact that they fly to your house on Rublyovka, let your houses burn. And what do ordinary people do when drones with explosives crash into their windows? And that's why, as a citizen, I am deeply outraged that these scoundrels sit quietly and continue their fat asses. And that's why I believe that the people have every right to ask these questions. Summed up the Russian war criminal, who is already clearly preparing to seize power in the Russian Federation in the event of the fall of the current Kremlin regime.
A media story criticizing the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. It comes to Russians who are not directly related to the war, but believe that the war is being waged incorrectly. The generals stole everything. But again, it is sanctioned, or at least it has not been stopped by Putin and his inner circle.
Yevgeny Prigozhyn, head of the Wagner PMC, continues to undermine the regime of Vladimir Putin, criticizing the bureaucratic machine in the Russian Federation. This was reported by analysts of the American Institute for the Study of War in the ISW report. The analysts believe Putin could have deliberately ignored the Russian Defense Ministry's sabotage actions in order to avoid fulfilling a promise he allegedly made to Prigozhyn. However, the political situation in Russia is currently heating up. After all, a new public scandal between the followers of Prigozhyn and the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, has now begun. Both politicians position themselves as serious commanders, although both have nothing to do with the Russian armed forces, and they are only trying to appropriate the victories and push Russia's defeats onto others. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for staying with us. Stay updated, subscribe to our channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support really matters. Goodbye.